Most people assume men and women handle silence in exactly the same way, but that's simply not true. When the conversations stop, the texts dry up, and all contact fades into nothing, what's actually happening inside his head is nothing like what's happening inside yours. And whoever understands that gap ends up in a much stronger position. Not because they're scheming or playing some kind of game, but because they know how to hold on to their own peace while the other person is still stuck spinning in confusion about what went wrong. Silence is never experienced equally by both people. Assuming otherwise just leaves you stuck waiting, hoping for a message that may never actually arrive. Think about it honestly. You're sitting there with your phone in your hand, desperate to type something, anything, just to break that heavy quiet sitting between you. You keep telling yourself you're strong enough to wait it out, to resist the urge. But every hour crawls by like an entire day, and every buzz of your phone sends your heart racing, only for you to realize it's nothing, just some random notification, a sale alert, a reminder about something meaningless. You catch yourself checking if he's seen your last message, checking when he was last online, even though you're technically not together anymore. And somehow that silence ends up feeling louder than any argument you two ever had. Most people end up stuck in this strange in-between space, not quite together, but not fully separated either. Floating in this quiet limbo where reaching out first feels like admitting defeat, like proving you cared more, needed more, or couldn't handle a little distance. But here's the truth nobody tells you. While you're overanalyzing every little detail, building entire narratives around what his silence might mean, he's experiencing that same silence in a completely different way. Not better, not worse, just fundamentally different. And understanding that difference is exactly what stops you from spiraling. When communication comes to a halt, two entirely separate emotional experiences start playing out. Women tend to feel it almost instantly, like something significant has been suddenly torn away. Men, on the other hand, usually feel it much later, after enough time has passed for them to notice something is actually missing. She starts wondering if she ever really mattered to him. He starts wondering if he let something good slip through his fingers. She wants answers and closure right away. He wants space to think things through without any pressure attached. Same exact silence, but two completely different stories unfolding in their minds. If you don't understand this distinction, you'll keep making decisions based purely on your own emotions instead of what's actually happening on his end. For most women, silence lands like a heavy weight from the very first day. The moment the messages stop coming, your mind kicks into overdrive. You replay every conversation, dissect every word you said. Did I come across too eager? Did I seem uninterested? Did he meet someone new? Is he just busy? Or is this simply his quiet way of ending things? Your brain refuses to settle down. It keeps hunting for clues, trying to make sense of why someone who was texting you just yesterday has suddenly disappeared. For a lot of women, communication is directly tied to feeling connected. When he's texting, checking in, staying in touch, you feel noticed, valued, secure. So the moment all of that vanishes, it feels like he simply stopped caring, like whatever you had together is gone for good. And the pain isn't just about missing him, it's about what that silence seems to represent. Rejection, not being enough, the fear that he's moved on while you're still stuck holding on tightly. But here's what most women completely miss. During those first days or weeks, he usually isn't feeling anything close to what you're feeling. Not because he never cared about you, but because men simply process emotional distance in a completely different way. When he pulls back, when the texting stops, he isn't lying awake obsessing over you. He's not overanalyzing every detail the way you are. He's just going about his life, staying busy, and honestly, sometimes even feeling a bit of relief. There's no pressure on him to respond, no expectation weighing on him to keep the connection alive. Men often need space, simply to think clearly. They're not wired to process their emotions out loud in real time. They need room to step back, clear their heads, and eventually figure out what they actually want. So in those early days of silence, he might genuinely feel completely fine, not because he doesn't care about you at all, but because silence just doesn't carry the same emotional weight for him that it does for you. His attention is on whatever's directly in front of him, not on wondering whether you're upset or have already moved on. Work, friends, the gym, hobbies. He fills that quiet space with other things, and at first, it actually works for him. That right there is the first major difference between you two. She experiences the quiet as genuine emotional pain, while he experiences it as a kind of relief from pressure he didn't even realize he was carrying. The first week or two looks completely different depending on which side you're standing on. She's struggling, questioning everything, maybe even breaking down in tears. He's coasting along, barely giving it a second thought. But that sense of relief he's feeling doesn't last forever. The space that initially felt freeing eventually starts to feel oddly empty, even though he might not notice that shift right away. Most men don't wake up the very next day after silence begins and suddenly think, "I miss her." It happens much more subtly, a slow, creeping realization that builds over time. Days pass, then weeks go by, and small moments start sneaking in. He hears a song that suddenly reminds him of you. He comes across something funny and instinctively wants to send it to you, then remembers you two aren't talking anymore. He has a rough day and suddenly notices there's no one to vent to the way there used to be. Those little moments slowly pile up, and eventually that silence shifts from feeling like relief to feeling like real loss. And here's the key part to understand. By the time he starts feeling that absence, you've most likely already worked through your own emotional storm. You've cried, overthought everything, felt the full weight of the silence, and maybe you've even started healing already. You're simply in a completely different place emotionally by then. That timing gap changes absolutely everything. While you were experiencing that silence as outright rejection, he was experiencing it as freedom. While you were wondering if you ever mattered to him, he was completely absorbed in his own life. But now, slowly the tables start turning. You've already faced the pain, confronted your feelings head on, and started reclaiming your own life. You're no longer checking your phone every 5 minutes or scrolling back through old conversations trying to decode what went wrong. You're simply living your life. And that shift in your energy is something he notices, even from a distance. Men are strange in this particular way. They often don't fully realize what they actually want until it's suddenly no longer available to them. When you were always the one reaching out first, giving attention freely, staying consistently available, he could afford to take that for granted. He knew exactly where you stood, that you'd respond, that you'd always be there. There was no mystery left to chase. But now, with you stepping back, with your usual energy no longer readily available, something inside him starts to shift. He begins wondering, is she okay? Is she thinking about me at all? Has she already moved on? Is there someone else now? This is the part that hardly anyone ever talks about. When both people stop reaching out entirely, that silence forces each person to confront themselves honestly. For you, that meant facing your own feelings, your fears, your desperate need for answers, and you've already done that difficult work. For him, that process is only just beginning. The silence slowly transforms into genuine absence, and absence has a strange way of sparking curiosity. It makes him start remembering what he actually had and question whether pulling away was really the right call. This is exactly where you need to stay careful. When he finally starts feeling that absence and decides to reach out, your first instinct might be to respond immediately, to prove you still care, that you're still available, that the door is wide open. That instinct right there is the biggest mistake you can make. Slipping right back into being the person who's always available just restarts the exact same cycle all over again. The mystery disappears instantly, and he settles right back into his comfort zone. Think about it honestly. Every single time you reached out first before, kept conversations alive on your own, you were essentially teaching him that your attention came guaranteed. He never had to wonder about it, never had to actually work for it. And whenever someone knows they'll always have something without effort, they simply don't value it the same way. Human nature makes this pretty clear. We rarely appreciate what we already have until the possibility of losing it becomes real. So when you finally pull back and truly embrace the silence, you break that entire pattern completely. You stop being the guaranteed option. You stop being the person quietly waiting in the background, hoping he'll eventually notice you. You've shifted the entire dynamic, and that's precisely when the balance of power genuinely starts to change. That lingering uncertainty, wondering whether he's still interested or whether you've already moved on completely, is exactly what makes him start paying real attention. Not because he's being manipulative, but because now there's actually something at stake for him. He has to genuinely consider whether he's willing to risk losing you for good. The real power of silence isn't just that it makes him miss you. It's that it gives you the space to become someone who no longer needs him to miss you in the first place. It gives you room to rebuild your own confidence, your sense of self, your inner peace. And once you genuinely start feeling okay without him, everything shifts. Energy simply doesn't lie. People notice when you've genuinely changed, when you're no longer sitting around waiting for someone else's attention. That kind of energy naturally draws people in, not because you're playing games, but because you're truly living a full, complete life without needing anyone else's approval to feel whole. Meanwhile, on his side, things tend to move much more slowly. At first, he might test the waters carefully, maybe a casual "hey" text, or liking one of your posts online. He's not ready to jump into a real deep conversation just yet. He simply wants to see if you're still around, if you still care even a little, if that door is still open at all. And this is exactly where most women slip up. They notice that small bit of attention and assume it must mean something significant. They respond way too quickly, way too eagerly. And suddenly, he knows for certain you're still fully available. He doesn't need to change a single thing about his behavior, and the entire dynamic stays exactly the same. He can comfortably keep you on the back burner while he continues figuring out what he actually wants. But if you don't respond right away, or if you respond calmly and casually without revealing too much, he's left sitting there wondering. And that wondering is precisely what keeps him thinking about you. It makes him realize you're genuinely not just sitting around waiting anymore. That small flicker of panic, that real possibility that you might actually be moving on, is exactly what flips the entire dynamic in your favor. The silence starts working for you because now you're no longer chasing him, no longer glued anxiously to your phone, no longer hoping for some small sign that he still cares. You're simply living your own life, and he can genuinely feel that shift. He notices the change happening. He feels that growing distance, and curiosity naturally kicks in. He starts genuinely wanting to reach out, not just to casually test the waters, but to see if there's actually something still worth saving between you two. Here's the harder truth you need to accept. Not every man will come back, and that's genuinely okay. The entire point of embracing silence isn't to force him into chasing you. It's to remind yourself that your value has never depended on being chased in the first place. You don't need his attention to feel worthy as a person. You don't need his text to feel emotionally secure. Silence teaches you, in the clearest possible way, that your peace was never dependent on anyone else's presence in your life. And once you genuinely learn that lesson, it stops mattering whether he ever comes back or not. You remain solid and whole either way. That right there is the real shift in power. Once you stop needing one specific outcome, his actions no longer have any control over your emotions. If he reaches out, great, you get to decide whether you even want to engage. If he doesn't reach out, that's completely fine too, because your happiness was never actually tied to him in the first place. You fully reclaimed your own power, and that's exactly what most people never manage to do. They stay trapped in endless waiting, hoping, needing someone else's validation. You, on the other hand, have already moved well beyond that. Now let's talk honestly about what happens if he actually does reach out. This is where things can get genuinely tricky. After weeks, maybe even months of complete silence, he finally sends you a message. It could be an apology, some casual small talk, or maybe he acts like nothing significant even happened between you two, and now you're faced with a real choice. Do you respond? Do you ignore it completely? Do you consider giving him another chance? Here's the honest truth. The simple fact that he's texting you doesn't actually mean much on its own. What genuinely matters is why he's reaching out and what he's actually willing to do differently this time around. If it's just boredom, loneliness, or passing curiosity, that's simply not enough. But if he's genuinely realized he made real mistakes and is truly ready to show up differently, that's an entirely different situation altogether. You honestly can't tell the difference from just one single message. You have to actually watch his actions play out over time. This is exactly where a lot of women stumble. That message finally comes through and your heart immediately jumps. You suddenly feel like maybe, just maybe, your feelings weren't crazy after all. But that one single message doesn't erase all the silence that came before it. It doesn't automatically mean he's genuinely changed or that things will actually be different this time around. It simply shows that he happened to be thinking of you in that particular moment. A brief flicker of curiosity is not remotely the same thing as real, lasting commitment. You have to step back and look at the much bigger picture here. Minds wander constantly, and one random text doesn't prove anything meaningful except that you happen to cross his mind briefly. This is exactly where all your personal growth during the silence really starts to matter. You're no longer desperately starving for attention. You no longer accept small breadcrumbs just to feel some sense of connection. You've spent this entire time genuinely rebuilding yourself, and now you truly understand your own worth. So if he reaches out with minimal effort, you'll be able to see it clearly for exactly what it is, and you'll be able to walk away without feeling like you're losing anything meaningful at all. You're actively protecting the peace you worked so hard to build. But if he reaches out with real, genuine effort, willing to sit through the tough conversations, actually showing through consistent action that he's truly different now, then you get to decide for yourself whether to give things another honest chance. And that choice comes entirely from a place of strength, not desperate need. You'd be choosing him because you genuinely want to, not because you simply can't function without him. That's a completely different kind of energy altogether. That's someone who fully knows their own worth and absolutely refuses to settle for less. The honest truth is that silence between a man and a woman was never really just about missing each other. It's really about both people being forced to face themselves without the constant distraction of the relationship pulling their attention. It's about genuinely discovering who you are when you're not constantly fixated on someone else. Men and women simply experience emotional distance in fundamentally different ways. She feels it quickly, processes it deeply, and often ends up coming out stronger on the other side. He feels it much more slowly, in his own time, and usually only realizes what he actually lost after she's already moved forward without him. That's simply the pattern that tends to play out. Understanding all of this stops you from taking his silence so personally. You stop panicking every time he doesn't reach out. You stop chasing him and constantly waiting for some kind of move on his part, because you finally realize the silence was never really about you at all. It's about him working through his own stuff internally. Meanwhile, you're the one actually rebuilding, remembering exactly what it feels like to be whole entirely on your own. And here's the truly beautiful part of all this. Once you genuinely heal and stop needing his validation altogether, absolutely nothing he does or doesn't do can shake you anymore. If he reaches out, you can choose to engage or simply choose not to. If he doesn't reach out, you're still completely fine either way. You're no longer emotionally dependent on his actions whatsoever. That genuine freedom is really the whole point of embracing silence in the first place. It was never really about making him miss you. It's about fully reclaiming yourself as a person. A lot of people assume the real goal is simply getting him back, but the actual goal is learning to stop caring whether he ever comes back at all. That's the exact moment you stop letting his actions dictate your emotions. You stop letting his silence define your own sense of worth. You simply live your life, feel genuinely good, and remain at peace with yourself. And that right there is the ultimate real win. When both people completely stop reaching out, silence has this powerful way of revealing exactly who you really are. It shows who can actually sit with discomfort and genuinely grow from it, and who panics and quickly retreats back into old familiar patterns. It reveals who's actually willing to put in the real inner work and who's simply looking for a quick, easy fix. It shows who's genuinely ready for something real and lasting and who's still stuck playing games. Most importantly, it reveals whether you've truly healed or whether you're still quietly holding on to something that no longer serves your life. Silence essentially acts as a mirror. It reflects back everything you've been avoiding all along: the fear of being alone, the constant need for external validation, the deep-seated belief that your worth somehow depends on someone else's presence. Genuinely facing those truths, working through them honestly, changes you at your core. You come out the other side stronger, clearer, and far more grounded than before. You stop needing outside validation just to feel okay within yourself. You find your own genuine peace, your own natural rhythm, your own authentic happiness. And that's precisely when you realize silence was never something to fear in the first place. It's actually something worth embracing fully. On the other side of that silence exists a version of you that simply doesn't crumble the moment someone stops texting back. A version that doesn't lie awake at night questioning whether you're good enough. A version that fully knows its own worth and doesn't need anyone else's approval to confirm it. That's genuinely who you were always meant to become. Silence simply helped you discover that stronger version of yourself a little bit faster than you might have otherwise. So when both of you have completely stopped reaching out, don't panic and don't chase after him. Don't break the silence out of fear or loneliness creeping in. Sit with it fully. Let it do its important work. Let it strip away everything that no longer genuinely serves you. Let it show you exactly who you really are when you're not desperately trying to be enough for someone else's approval. That's precisely where your true power actually lives. Your power was never meant to come from his attention, his messages, or his validation of you. It comes entirely from your own ability to stand firmly on your own, feel genuinely good independently, and build a life that doesn't require anyone else to feel complete. And if he does eventually come back after all of this, if he truly realizes what he lost and is genuinely ready to show up differently this time, you get to decide whether he actually fits into the life you've since built for yourself. And that decision now comes purely from inner strength, not desperate need. You're not taking him back because you literally can't survive without him. You're considering it simply because it genuinely makes sense, because he truly adds real value to your life, because it authentically aligns with the person you've become through all of this. And if it doesn't make sense to you, you can walk away completely without breaking down, because you already know without a doubt that you'll be okay no matter what happens. That's the real lasting power in truly understanding what happens when both people stop reaching out completely. It was never actually about winning or losing, never about who cared more or who broke first emotionally. It's genuinely about using that silence to rediscover exactly who you are underneath it all. To remember that you were already whole long before they ever entered your life, and that you remain just as whole now that they're gone from it. Silence was never meant to be the end of your story. It's actually the beginning of the chapter where you finally learn to put yourself first. Days, weeks, maybe even months into that silence, you're simply not the same person you were when it all began. You've cried, you've questioned yourself repeatedly, and you've sat through the discomfort of genuinely not knowing what's happening on the other side. But through all of it, you've also grown tremendously. You've learned you're far stronger than you ever gave yourself credit for, that you can genuinely handle the quiet without falling apart. That constant communication was never really what made you feel secure in the first place. You've learned that your true worth was never tied to someone else's attention, and that your inner peace never actually depended on their presence in your life. The silence between a man and a woman is never truly equal, but that's perfectly okay. While he's still slowly figuring out what he actually wants, you're already 10 steps ahead of him. You've done the difficult work, faced the pain head on, and come out the other side genuinely stronger than before. Whether he ever fully realizes what he lost or not, you've already gained something far more valuable than his validation. You've gained yourself, and that's something nobody can ever take away from you again. So let the silence simply be exactly what it truly is. A space to grow, a moment to breathe, a genuine chance to rebuild yourself from the ground up. Don't fight against it, don't fear it, don't try to fill it with desperate messages or empty, meaningless words. Just let it happen naturally. On the other side of that silence waits the strongest, most grounded version of yourself you've ever been. And that version of you is worth every single second of discomfort it took to finally find her. The next time you feel that familiar urge to reach out, to break the silence, to check if he's thinking about you, pause for a moment. Take a slow breath. Remind yourself that you genuinely don't need to know. You don't need his validation. You don't need his attention to prove that you ever mattered. You already matter completely on your own. You always did, even before he ever came into the picture. And the silence, it's simply showing you that truth in the hardest, most uncomfortable way possible. Once you truly see it, once you fully understand that your worth was never tied to his response, you become genuinely unstoppable. Not because he eventually came back, but because you no longer need him to.